YouTube, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be taking a look at my first impression review of the HOKA Carbon X 2. This is a shoe that has been much anticipated by running enthusiasts and especially HOKA running shoe enthusiasts because it is a second generation shoe that improves upon many of the flaws of its predecessor. So let's get into it. Impossibly cushioned and exceptionally propulsive, the HOKA One One Carbon X 2 is a carbon-plated speed machine. Featuring several updates, this highly cushioned race shoe is ready to help speed through your next marathon or ultra marathon. Well, that all sounds very fast and propulsive. I was actually very excited to give this a try, hearing about how much user feedback HOKA was listening to and how much of that they put into this shoe. But without further ado, let's get on to the specs of this shoe, starting with the stack height. So coming in at 32 millimeters in the heel and 27 millimeters in the forefoot, that is a total drop of 5 millimeters from heel to toe. And honestly, it didn't feel that low. It actually felt like a higher stack height. I almost felt like it was closer to a 6 or maybe even 8 millimeters, but I didn't really mind that, especially considering what I think this shoe is actually best for. But we're gonna get into that later in the review, so stay tuned. Moving on to the weight of the shoe. Coming in at 8.5 ounces in a men's size 9 and a 7.8 ounces in a woman's size 8. I think that is pretty heavy compared to some of the other super shoes on the market. But I think when we get into some of the other specs of the shoe, I think that weight becomes a little more justified. But let's start off by talking about the fit. So the fit of the shoe felt great, especially when I slid right in at the beginning. The lacing system feels super smooth, especially around the ankle. The toe space was just about perfect. I would say if you have a wider foot, maybe be a little bit weary about grabbing this shoe because it does feel a little bit narrow. But I say if you go true to size, you're gonna have very little issues, especially considering how great the lockdown is on top of the midfoot and around the ankle. And that brings us really well into the upper. So it's starting off with a nice engineered upper mesh material that is actually super breathable. I really enjoyed how the upper fit around my foot and then how well it allowed air to pass through it, especially for a racing shoe. You'd think the mesh should be a little more airy and a little lightweight, and I think it does that well. But it also doesn't detract from the lockdown and support that I'm feeling. And that, I think, has a lot to do with a nice stout heel counter and a very helpful lockdown around the ankle. And going off of the nice fit, I think the tongue has a lot to do with that as well. It is semi-gusseted, which helps a lot with the sliding around so it's not moving on top of your midfoot, especially mid-run. And there is a nice separation on the top there that just like helps separate the tongue so it's not pressing on that tendon that's always popping out of the top of your foot, which I thought was a nice detail to add. Moving on now to the midsole. So this is where all the magic happens in a super shoe, especially when you look at how the foam interacts with the carbon plate that is in there, and we'll get to that in a second. That is gonna be a resilient CM EVA midsole, which is a very light, softer midsole compared to this shoe's predecessor. And also, it's still kind of allowed to have that nice pop in your step, you know? It's not as soft as like the next percent foam, but I think that helps in some ways, especially when you're looking at resiliency. But if you're someone who prefers a more responsive, reactive foam that is a little bit firmer but still soft, then I think HOKA did a great job with this. And that kind of moves on to the resilient rubberized EVA midsole foam that they have under the bulk of this CM EVA foam, because it is actually serving as the outsole as well. So it's a little firmer, it's a little harder, but it is comprehensive on the bottom, and it actually is the only thing separating this shoe's carbon plate from the ground. And that adds to a really great snap. So let's do this quickly. Let's look at how aggressive the shoe is here. So as you can see right now, I haven't worn it down very much, but there is a lot of aggression here. It's not quite as aggressive as maybe some of the other shoes on the market, but I think that's a good thing, especially for when you're looking at how you want to use this shoe. But overall, I would say the midsole foam, much improved from its predecessor, and it feels really good. HOKA is really great about listening to user feedback, so big shout out to them for making this happen. Finally, on the outsole is this also very innovative back heel to add some aerodynamics to it. I'm gonna say that I haven't noticed anything quite like it yet. It almost acts as like a counterbalance to when you're swinging back and forth, and it helps a lot with the transition, because I'm gonna say they don't advertise it in the shoe, but this shoe definitely still has a nice rocker in it, which I noticed a little bit more when I kind of tested running on the heel. When I was heel striking just a little bit more, I noticed a slightly better roll than compared to like really trying to get on my toes and like sprint some faster reps. I still got a nice snap off, but I didn't get the same rolling motion that I kind of expect from HOKA, and it actually felt like it contributed more to my stride. So heel strikers, rejoice. You found the super shoe for you. This is gonna put in a lot more energy back into your stride than from something like the Next Percent. But that about does it for the midsole and outsole. I've been pretty impressed with the ride of this thing. So big shout out to HOKA for putting in the work there. I've noticed it immediately, even though I've only gotten a couple of first runs on it. So that rolls really well into my positives and drawbacks of the shoe. Starting with my positive, that positive is gonna be the lockdown in the ankle, but also the improved foam on the bottom. I thought it's actually a really nice reactive foam that's still kind of soft. It felt a little firm at first, but after I got near the end of my first run or two, it really kind of felt like I sunk in just a little bit extra, and it made me want to keep running, which I thought was really nice. The one drawback I had is on the upper as well, and I have this issue a lot. I think that's because I have a narrow foot, but I'm gonna say there's just a bunch of bunching in the laces up top here, but I'm gonna work a little harder to correct that over my next couple runs and see if that improves by the time I get to my full review of this shoe. And that brings us into that durability prediction. I touched upon this earlier, but I think especially for a super shoe, this is gonna be an awesome 400 to maybe even 500 miles on it. If you go 500 miles on it, I will be dumb impressed with you, and I'll be dumb impressed with the shoe as well. But as far as super shoe goes, this is a very impressive and resilient foam. And that actually brings us really well again into the best uses of this shoe. I think this is the kind of shoe where you can really theoretically do it all, especially as a super shoe with a carbon plate. I love that it's not too aggressive, because now it allows you to do some daily training in this shoe. And I really like that. Like, I can take this on long runs. I can take this on workout runs. I can pretty much wear this for anything I want to do, from kind of a steezy pace, a medium run, a long run, all the way down to tempo pace, and even maybe get away with some track work in this shoe as well, if I really want to protect the foot and have a little extra support. Because as a super shoe, I'm gonna say this is actually one of the more supportive super shoes. So if you tend to overpronate, I'm not saying you should grab this one, but I'm saying you have a better bet wearing this super shoe over probably any other super shoes if you have a big problem overpronating. So you can still get that carbon plated experience without going overboard on something that's gonna throw you in a little bit too much. Moving on to the price, at $180, I'm gonna say for a super shoe, that's a pretty good price. But I think as someone who maybe wants to buy this shoe as the shoe that they are going to wear all the time, do their easy miles in, do their workouts in, do their racing in, that's a pretty good value, because I think you're gonna get a lot of resiliency out of this shoe. I think this is a great marathon super shoe for the people, and this is a great marathon super shoe if you have a bigger frame. Actually, if you're one of those bigger, stronger runners, you're probably gonna enjoy this shoe, because the midsole is a little more resilient and probably just gonna hold you in a little bit better. Overall, I've really enjoyed my first couple runs in this shoe, and I really can't wait to take this longer distances, push it, and see how my legs respond when I put more miles in the Carbon X. That about does it today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. If you're enjoying the content, please feel free to like, subscribe, and smash that bell button below. And until next time, y'all know the drill. Stay healthy, stay chill. Cheers, friends.